Hello, my name is Paige Roberts, and today I'm going to tell you all about honeybees. Honeybees are endangered and they are struggling right now, but they're a crucial part to our environment, and hopefully they will be able to get off the endangered list. My family and I have been working beehives since I was about 10 years old, and so we have tons of our own hives, and we have gotten our own honey from our hives. Within a hive, you have three different types of bees. You've got your one queen bee, which is going to be the biggest bee out of the hive. And then you've got your drone bees, which make up about 10% of the hive. These are going to be your medium-sized bees and your male bees. And then about 90% of the hive are your worker bees. Your worker bees are going to be your infertile female bees. Your queen bee is going to live in the hive and make all the decisions that the hive might need to make as a whole. The queen bee's main purpose is to produce eggs, and she produces about 2,000 eggs per day. And then she is the longest living bee in the hive, so she's going to live about 5 years compared to the other bees, which is about 40 to 50 days. You've got your drone bees, and these are going to be your male bees that are going to protect the hive. They serve the purpose of mating with the queen, as well as protecting the queen and protecting the hive as a whole from other bees from other colonies or other insects that might potentially try to be taking the larva or taking the honey. And they live on average for about 40 days, and after they serve their purpose, they just kind of die off around those 40 days. The next bee that you have is your worker bee, and these are going to be the smallest bees, and they are going to typically be the only bee that you on average will see unless you're working at hive. They're the only ones that are going to be leaving the colony, and they're going to be the ones that are going to get the pollen and going to get the water and just going to get anything else that the hive might need. So when you think of a bee, this is what you think of. You typically don't see the drones, which are the larger bees, and you definitely won't see a queen bee unless you're working the hive. The worker bees go and get pollen, they make the honey in the hives, and they tend to anything that the queen or the drone bees might need, and then they take care of the larva after the queen leaves the larva. And then they typically live for about 40 days, and then they'll die off. Honeybees have many interesting characteristics, such as being very social. Honeybees have a bee dance, and their bee dance is what we would call like shaking hands with a friend. They give their bee dance, it kind of determines where their colony is from, what they are out doing. They have different dances for those kinds of things. You won't notice their bee dance. It's just something they do within each other just to kind of have fun, just say hey, like how are you doing, those kinds of things. Bees also have an odor plum. Their odor comes from whenever they release their stinger, and it's just kind of a warning to other bees, and it can be to attack, it can be to take cover. It just depends on what kind of sting that they're leaving. Once their stinger goes in, it automatically releases, so typically if you get stung by one bee, there will be more coming after, and you're probably going to want to remove that stinger and remove yourself from that area. Honeybees can be calmed by smoke. Most workers have a smoker, and when you're working your hive, you want to smoke the bees before you enter their colony, just to calm them down, let them know that everything is going okay. Some other characteristics of honeybees is they will swarm. So whenever they get too big for their home, if they're living in a tree, if they're living in boxes, they will all collect as a group and move together, protecting the queen bee, which will be in the very middle of their group. And they will take as much as they can, such as they'll take any honey that they can move with them, they'll take any larvae that they can, and they're pretty much just going to move to a new location, and so they can start a bigger family there. And they will not bring all of their bees because they can't travel that far, so some of them are just going to immediately die off afterwards. You'll typically see swarming in the summertime. Whenever they get really hot, they're going to typically try to go to a cooler place. Like if there are trees in the sun, they're going to want to move somewhere in the shade, or they might be moving due to size. Typically when they move, they're not going to find a home automatically, so they're going to swarm, and you'll see them bundled up outside of a tree, underneath a bench, on a trash can, places like that. And it's kind of like when a family moves and they don't necessarily have a house immediately, they're going to need to find somewhere temporary to go with all of their stuff until they can find something more permanent. Honeybees do not hibernate. They will still be functioning all year round. They're not going to be near as busy in the wintertime, but they will still be going and getting just essential needs that they need to make it through the winter. You will see a lot more honeybees die off in the wintertime due to it being cold and them not being able to make it back to their hive. There are on average about 15 to 60,000 bees within a hive. You will typically see about 30,000 on average, depending on their location, on if they've just swarmed. Different things like that can determine how big they are and the amount of bees within the hive. Honeybees are not aggressive, which is a surprise to most people. Most people think honeybees are going after them or they're gonna try to sting them, and they'll typically start swatting at them. Once you start swatting at them, they go into defense mode. And once they are in defense mode, that is the only time a bee will sting you. The bee's not just going to come and sting you just for fun. They will only sting when they feel threatened. So honeybees will land on you and you move a certain way and not see them, and they're going to sting you, but it's not going to be intentional. They do know that once they sting you, they are going to die, and so they do not take that lightly. They only sting you if they feel like they're going to end up dying anyways. And once they do sting you, they have about a couple minutes to live, and then they're going to die off. And so that's where the odor comes in, and they're going to try to warn their other bees that are around them. Once you do get stung by a bee, it is important that if you can, you try to get that stinger out of you, because the faster you get the stinger out of you, the less venom that's going to go inside of you, and it's not going to hurt as bad. Honeybees are not aggressive. But once a hive becomes Africanized, they will become aggressive. It is very uncommon to see an Africanized hive, but once a hive becomes Africanized, it is very clear to determine that they have been Africanized. You will get an Africanized hive when the queen becomes aggressive, and once she becomes aggressive, it changes the mood and the tone for the entire hive. Once she gets mean, the whole hive will be mean, and they will aim for you, and you will know when they are Africanized. If you get within a couple feet of their hive, they will swarm you and attack you. And the way to fix an Africanized hive is to get to the hive, find the queen bee, kill her, and find a new queen bee, and hope that the hive is going to accept the queen bee. By doing this, you're definitely going to want to be a trained beekeeper and make sure you have the proper gear to attend to that hive. And even though you give them a new queen, there is a chance that they're not going to accept her and they're going to kill her off. And at that point, the hive is most likely going to die off. But the chances of them not accepting the new queen is very unlikely. They want to strive and they want to be a hive and be a home and be a family together. So they're going to give the queen a chance. And once they get a new queen and she has a different attitude and sets a different tone for the hive, they will become un-Africanized and not be aggressive. To extract honey from your hive, it's a long and messy process. To explain to you in a short version, you're going to take the frames that have the honey and the honeycomb on them, and you're going to scrape them off, typically with an electric knife, and you're going to scrape it off into a large bucket, such as a 5-gallon bucket. And after you scrape this off, you're going to put the frames in a spinner, and once you put the frames in there, you're just going to spin off any extra honey, any extra wax that you might have not gotten off with the knife, and then you're going to take the bucket and you're going to filter the honey from the wax and the larva. And so you'll use a pretty big filter for this, and then you're going to use a smaller filter and a smaller filter, and you're going to filter it for about 3 or 4 times, and then you'll put it in a mixer and mix it up just kind of like you would mix up a cake mix. And that's just kind of making sure that you got everything out and just giving it a good spin around to just get everything moving and make sure it's not just sitting there. After that, you're going to be able to start canning your honey or just keep it for yourself in the 5-gallon bucket, depending on what you need. Honey is very interesting because it never expires. Honey you can have for 20 years and it's still going to be just as good in 20 years as it was the day that you got the honey. Although honey does get hard and crystallizes, you can put it in your car on a hot day and it's going to be runny again and uncrystallize, and it'll be good to go. You ever notice when you're in the store and you're looking for honey, there are many different brands of honey, and as you look at the different brands of honey, they are different colors. Determining color depends on how much sugar water a hive has had. So if you give a hive a lot of sugar water and they depend more on the sugar water than going to get pollen, your honey is going to be a very, very light color. It's going to be a light yellowish color, and it's going to be more runny. Whereas if you don't give a colony sugar water and it's strictly just based on the pollen, based on water that they are getting themselves, it's going to be a darker, more thick consistency of honey. And so it just determines what kind of honey you're looking for. Personally, I prefer a more thick and darker honey because it's more of a natural, organic kind of honey. Here's an example of a dark and thick consistency of the honey, and this is a raw and unfiltered honey. So it's got the darker and the more thicker consistency, whereas some honeys, they're going to be a lighter and sugar watery. And that also can determine on the price of the honey. So that's just something to think about next time that you are buying honey at the store. So today I hope you have learned about the different kinds of bees in the colony, the different characteristics, and how the colony functions as a whole, as well as how you could potentially get honey from a hive. And maybe next time you're at the store, you'll think twice about which honey that you're buying.